Hello, and welcome to your Module 4 orientation video. So for this module, you're going to be engaging in a scholarly dialogue with a couple of your classmates. In this video, I'm going to go over 3 documents. The first is the assignment sheet. The second is a sample paper. The third is the schedule for this unit. So at the end of this video, you should have an idea of our expectations for the assignment, the procedures you're going to go through to get there, what it looks like, what your final product will look like, and then lastly, how we're going to do it over the next couple of days. So let me begin here. First of all, you'll notice that the length, 1,250 words per person. First of all, it's approximate, and also, again, that's per person, so there's that sense. What's the background to this scholarly dialogue? Well, let's go ahead and break it down sentence by sentence. So in the first 3 modules, you analyzed your field's form of scholarly writing, you compiled an annotated bibliography, and proposed a scholarly paper responding to a topical conference within the discourse community. So we essentially wrote to a scholarly audience, we gather information after we assess the field, and so what are we going to do? From this point on, you are going to, at this point, engage in a scholarly dialogue and produce a written transcript of your exchanges. So what that means is, now that you've submitted the conference paper, now that you've crafted the abstract, the next step is to have the dialogue, the Q&A, that comes after the presentations of the papers. So this really is set up to mirror what an academic exchange looks like. And I'll post a link actually to a sample kind of dialogue that members of a discourse community might have at a scholarly conference, so you can get an idea of it. Basically, the idea is that everybody gives their presentation, so they're the expert, they speak on their topic, and then afterwards, because the panels are grouped thematically, they all speak to common questions, the kind of questions that drive inquiry within a discourse community, or that drive refinement maybe within a field of practice, a community of practice. So you're at the point now where you've already given your presentation, and we're going to try to find commonalities with others whose work won't, of course, address the exact same inquiry question, but it will have shared values and shared practices within those communities. And so we're going to try to extend our precise inquiry question and our findings to other members of the communities to engage more people and do some outreach. So your audience is still experts within your field, but it's experts who may not have as much knowledge about your particular topic. So they can pick up on it fairly easily, but they need your guidance. So that's the purpose of this project. It's also a little less formal than the conference abstract in that it really is a transcript of a verbal exchange. So what that means is it won't have the kind of audible pauses, the like those ticks that we have when we speak. It will be edited to remove those, but at the same time, no one would expect that while responding to a question, you use perfect active voice and concise sentence structure. So those aren't really things that you're going to be assessed on here. It might be helpful to review what exactly a dialogue is. So I use the OED since that's kind of the standard dictionary definition here. A conversation carried on between 2 or more people, an exchange. And so your scholarly, notice the emphasis on scholarly dialogue, should be a written exchange of ideas about a shared interest within your field of practice or your discourse community. And to establish your credibility, your scholarly dialogue should use expert-level jargon and mention relevant, reliable sources. So again, it's like you're speaking in code, but the other people are going to be able to crack the code, like they work for the CIA or something. So anyway, what is the kind of objective of it? The objective is for you to engage a scholarly audience of peers in an ongoing informed discussion of a shared interest. Okay, so how does this look? Well, first of all, topic selection. So I'm going to put you into groups, and the groups are going to be loosely based on shared interests. And part of the challenge here is moving from your particular inquiry question to a more common shared interest within the discourse community. What you're going to have to do there is find that common ground, relationships between seemingly disparate topics. How you want to exchange ideas is up to you. I'll create a discussion thread for each group on Blackboard, and I encourage you all to use it, even if only to swap contact info or phone numbers or something. So in case you are on campus and you want to meet up, you can do that. If you're taking this class remotely, use the discussion board. Everything will be visible there. It's a written record of your work, and it's pretty easy to go with. Alternatively, you could also create a shared Google Doc or a OneDrive file, and you could share it with me, and you could use like track changes to show or I'm sorry, not even track changes. You could just comment on whose ideas are what, so you could collaborate that way. The idea behind this, however you want to do it, is to make visible the work behind it, the drafting and revision that goes into the finished product. It's a way for me to make sure that everybody's pulling their weight. So you can even do an audio recording if you want, or if you want a conference call or Skype, you could video chat if you're spread out remotely, but the time difference can make it work. So your final product will be 2 parts, a Word doc in transcript format and a record of your dialogue. Again, the transcript should be edited for clarity, content, and style. You'll see an example of that. You'll see a sample. So one thing that does matter a lot, in the dialogue, each group member must ask at least 1 question, respond to at least 2 questions, and offer concluding thoughts. So that's a way to make sure everybody's asking questions, prompting response, responding, contributing, and then of course, when you draw conclusions, you're pointing towards shared values, interests, and offering suggestions for moving forward for future work. So however you want to submit that record of your dialogue is fine. I would really suggest the discussion board's easy, a shared doc where you point out who did what, you comment on other people's work, and you ask questions, suggest revisions. That works for me, or an audio or video recording I can take too. So here are your points of assessment. Completeness, jargon use, clarity, correctness, style, topic selection, engagement, and transitions, flow, exchange of ideas. I think that's all fairly self-explanatory. And then I have a kind of example here of how this should be formatted. Now, the format's important because you'll notice I have the speaker, then we have a break, and then we have the dialogue. So if this looks like a script, it should, because it makes it easy to read and it mirrors an actual dialogue. So this is the format you want to use. And again, we'll look at that in the sample paper. So let's go ahead and look at that sample paper. So this is from a group that took this class online over the summer, and their theme was infectious disease prevention and education. And so if we look at the opening remarks from Kira, who served as their kind of moderator, she tells us that they're interested in exploring the topic of infectious disease and various methods utilized to prevent their spread, each focused on vastly different topics. Joy researched HIV and AIDS, Gabriella tackled Zika, and I discussed hospital-acquired infections. And this is why I chose this for your sample paper. While these topics at first glance do not appear to have much in common, despite all belonging under the umbrella of the infectious disease, we were all drawn to the role prevention plays in relieving their public health burden. Almost more importantly, we also discussed the effect that education has on the prevention of these infectious diseases. And then she goes ahead and asks Joy here the first question. So Joy is going to take it away. So you'll notice how you have to find the kind of lowest common denominator that you can all speak to and go from there. Now, I'll post this, the full paper, on Blackboard for you to read. But what I'd like you to kind of notice, besides that structure and the common denominator aspect, is the kind of pacing of the project. So for instance, this right here, these 250 words, that's an opening comment from Joy. And if you look at the prose, you'll notice it's not the most dense thing anyone's ever written, but it uses a lot of jargon, it grounds it in research study, and it relates it then at the end with some other questions moving forward. So she gives her spiel. What are some of the more commonly acquired infections? Do you see a trend? If so, can we educate people? So then Kira chimes in and does her bit. So notice how ending with the questions here is a strategy to engage other members of the panel. Now, you don't have to do that. In fact, I think sometimes it might be appropriate to not do that so that someone else can observe that kind of trend. But as a rhetorical style, you notice it kind of asking targeted questions. So here too, I wanted to ask both of you. That would be a way to. So you could even open it up to the whole panel there as well. You could say, "Does anybody have thoughts about this?" And then whoever can just chime in. So take a closer look at that. Notice the kind of level of jargon that they use. For instance, they're talking about specific diseases, but in terms of like how technical do they actually get? If we look at Joy's comment here, we'll see the biggest challenge for HIV/AIDS education is proven to be reaching the education methods in areas stricken with poverty. Uh, she mentioned some specific organizations dedicated to fighting it, but in recent years we see a decreasing trend in funding. So this is where like identifying something like a decreasing trend in funding, that's not jargony, but it is knowledge of a situation specific to members of this discourse community. So that's kind of the level where you want to get to. Now she does mention here like a PubMed article, and she briefly says, what does she say? They bring up the notion that the feasibility of implementing a large-scale prevention program will be meaningful as a long-term ambition, but short-term it's not a project that the South African infrastructure can handle. So we're not quoting, we're not presenting specific data, but we are presenting conclusions and relevant observations. So in terms of level of specificity, that's kind of the level we want to be at. So let's take one more thing here and let's take a look at the schedule for how we're going to do it. All right. So the first thing, which is due Friday, watch this video. You're doing that. And then draft a project proposal. So this should be short, just like your conference abstracts. About 250 words is fine. The proposal should take that same format. You're familiar with it. And outline the topic, purpose, and content of your scholarly dialogue. It should respond to a recent developing trend or emerging question within your field. If you want to pick a CFP for this, that could be really helpful, like a general, very general CFP, because that might kind of help you work from your particular inquiry topics to the larger interests and shared questions within the field. You don't have to. So post this to the appropriate discussion board thread and have a brief outline of each member's responsibilities. So then for Tuesday, you're going to outline the content for your scholarly dialogue. You should have a list of 8 to 10 closely related questions. Offer a few responses. These don't need to be long form yet. We're just looking for some notes. But outline, right? You're outlining your project. For the following Monday, the 5th, you should have a complete draft done. And then they'll give you 24 hours to proofread and edit it. So you'll notice it's not a ton of time. That's intentional. Take care with the grammar and stuff, but also I don't want you to focus too much on it. It is an informal project relative to what you just did. So while you are responsible for observing all of those annoying grammar rules that make English writing easy to read and intelligible, I'm not overly concerned with things like sentence structure or uber precise word choice, things of that nature. So I'm going to go ahead and sign off here. I've talked long enough. I'll get your group assignments to you, and from there you should probably access the discussion board and start swapping ideas of what you can work on. It is up to you to pick that topic. I'm just going to give you names. So do your best and have a great time. I think you'll enjoy this project. I love reading these, so have fun.